Hello, and welcome to Paranormal in Pennsylvania.
where we discuss history and haunts.
Today's story takes us actually to our second episode of Paranormal outside Pennsylvania, to Georgia. I'm Sarah.
David.
Let's get into it. So, today we're going to be discussing Kennesaw House, and this is located in Marietta, Georgia, and this is pretty close to where you grew up.
Yes, technically I grew up in like Ackworth area, but yeah, definitely Marietta is a very short drive.
And for people that aren't from Georgia, how can you orient them to Atlanta?
So Marietta is outside of the perimeter. If you take 75 north.
To the left, right?
Yes, northwest of
left.
Atlanta.
Up left versus northwest. One of us sounds much more official there. So my mother-in-law is supportive of our podcast. We love that. And she wanted to go tour somewhere when we were down there for the holidays. So we looked around, and the Kennesaw House is actually rated as one of the most haunted buildings in America, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've honestly never heard of it until we started looking around.
And she had never heard of it, if I remember correctly, and no one we spoke to. I mean, your whole family's from there. And not your whole family, your mom's family's from there. And no one had heard of it.
Yeah, it was really interesting, especially since, I don't know, for anyone who's listening, it's right next to the Marietta Square. It's so close. But you just maybe not would see it. It's right next to the train tracks.
Yeah. Actually, the train tracks are going to play an important part in the history. So the property was originally a cotton warehouse purchased by Dix Fletcher in 1855. And between being purchased and being a warehouse, it operated as a pop-up restaurant, which was very interesting to me. It has a really prime location right by the railroad tracks, as you mentioned, so really anything could probably thrive there. Fletcher, when he bought it, remodeled it and opened the Fletcher House Hotel. And what's cool is this place now operates as is it Marietta Museum or is it just general history?
Actually don't know. I think it might be the Marietta Museum.
Yeah, I think it was the Marietta History Museum. And they actually have things from this Fletcher House Hotel there. So we got to see some candle holders and beds and stuff. It was really cool. In the early years of the Civil War, the hotel was used as a Confederate hospital and morgue. On the evening of stealing a prominent steam engine, Union raiders stayed on the second floor of the then hotel. And this is a very important location for stealing this steam engine because it's conveniently located right next to the railroad. In 1864, the war ended and the Union took over Marietta. The general that was leading the Union Army burnt many buildings in his sweep of Marietta, but he spared this because Dix Fletcher, who was still the owner, was a Mason. Also, Dix's son-in-law was a Union spy that had aided the Union greatly. However, so much of the town was burning that nearby fires caused the fourth floor to catch on fire, but they managed to preserve the bottom three floors. In 1867, the property reopened as the Kennesaw House and was actually a hotel until the 1920s, when it then became a retail property. So the first floor was storefronts, and then the hotel did operate on the second and third floor, but was less popular. In 1979, the whole property was gutted and turned into office buildings. Eventually, Marietta bought it back and converted it to the Marietta Museum of History. There I have it written, which is how we were able to visit it.
Yeah. I think some important notes to maybe throw out now is while Sherman spared that building, the fourth floor of the building did indeed burn before it was stopped, just due to the fires raging around it.
I did say that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Well,
that's fine though. That is
but,
important. So we had the privilege of speaking to someone that's worked there for like 10, 20 years when we were there. So we got a lot of other cool facts. So if I missed anything else, please.
Yeah. So when it was being used by the Confederate Army, both as a morgue and a surgery, it was the third floor that was a surgery or operating rooms, and the fourth floor was a morgue.
Yeah.
Which kind of struck me as very interesting as to why the fourth floor was the morgue.
Yeah, why would you take bodies up?
Perhaps at the time when they were using it, it was winter, so cold. But
No, heat.
but
hot
heat
air
does
rises.
so
Interesting. And we should have asked the woman that worked there that. This museum was really, really cool. It had so much to offer, both specific to the history of the building and specific to the history of Marietta. Some of my favorite parts of it were a 1930s replica of a beauty salon. I thought that that was cool. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they had like the hotel room, and actually the Raiders, like a mock of the room the Raiders would have stayed in, set up. So this place is super haunted. Like I said, one of America's most haunted buildings, and they actually do offer ghost tours. Something that the woman that worked there told us is the building as it is now is actually larger than the building that was originally there. So the hauntings that are specific to the history of the building tend to stay in an L shape, but there are other paranormal activities that do occur in the other rooms, but the people that work there think that they're more linked to the artifacts that are there.
Right, because when you step off the elevator directly ahead of you and then to the left are the original considered wings of the hotel before they did additions to the building. So we were told that a lot of like activity pertaining to the hotel itself happens definitely along those avenues.
Yeah. So there's a functioning elevator that takes guests to the second floor, which is a museum, and then the third floor, which she said is currently used for special events. And the elevator can take staff down to the basement, but it's not accessible to the public. But this elevator is linked to a significant haunting. So if visited at night, it's said that the elevator will open on either the third floor or the basement, and that you will see a gruesome hospital surgery scene, complete with men screaming in agony, blood flooding the floor, and limbs scattered everywhere. And when we spoke to the woman that worked there, she said that, understandably, she thought this was much more plausible for the third floor, and that the reports of the basement are probably more inaccurate.
Right, because wasn't there not a basement until much later?
I think in the 80s, yeah.
Until the 80s when it was like overall renovated, yeah.
Right. In addition to this crazy hospital scene, are also reports of a Civil War era surgeon that has been seen riding the elevator in his bloody uniform. And given the history of it and the fact that there are ghost tours there, people will see this man and think that he is someone hired to portray a Civil War era surgeon. But then when they get to the floor, it will either open into that gruesome scene or the man will step off and disappear. Given that it's now a museum, this apparition has been mistaken for a person that works there. And many think that, again, the third floor accounts are reenactments, because that's where the surgery used to be. Only when they come down and they talk to the people and say that it was a pretty gruesome reenactment you guys had, do they realize that it was actually a haunting.
Kind of neat in a way, right? That you're walking through this and like, oh, what a cool reenactment, and then when you go back down the stairs, they're like, no, there's no actors or anything. That must be then like really scary. Like,
yeah, I wonder if they tell people that that's like a known haunting, because she was a little trepidatious to talk to us about ghost stuff.
Yeah, because I wonder if she's downplaying it, or some places would think, like a museum, if it was known to be very haunted, I can imagine that would scare some people away very easily.
That's true. In addition to the surgical scenes, there is a woman that is a very prominent ghost. She's specifically seen by children, and she wears an old-fashioned dress with pink lace trim. Since only children have seen her, they've been the ones that have identified her. And the way that they identify her is that as they're walking through the museum and they get to the pictures of Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher, they tell their parents that they just saw that lady.
Oh, that's creepy, especially since it's only kids.
I know, and I cannot imagine a parent hearing that.
Oh, man. Yeah, that would be or like a, haha, maybe you didn't see anything, and like, no, mommy or daddy, I definitely saw
Right.
a lady.
And the fact that they point to the picture and say this is her, that's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
In addition to seeing her in the museum, children have reported feeling compelled to look at the building and seeing a woman standing in the windows. Now, I will say I'm taking this with a grain of salt because one of their displays features like a mannequin looking out the window, so I think it could be confused, but the window where the mannequin is placed does not look out over the parking lot or anything. It like is facing another building. So I think it's unlikely that that's the window to which people are referring.
Wasn't it facing out towards the train tracks?
No, it was like, if this is the wall with the train tracks, it was like 90 degrees. It was,
Okay.
yeah. So it wasn't facing towards the square or anything either. So, again, always being a skeptic though, take it or leave it. With this place being an important place in society and history, there are reports of people seeing ghosts walking along the brick pathway and the streets of Marietta as if they're still intending to go enter this Kennesaw house. There are reports of this even back to the 1940s when a couple claimed to see a Civil War era soldier walk down the road and into the building. In addition to the haunting from the building itself, there are said to be paranormal happenings, as I said, with the artifacts. And they have this huge collection of war memorabilia, both Civil War, I think it was pretty much every war. And we didn't feel anything in that room, but the woman told us that that is the room that has the most common occurrences of paranormal happenings. What did happen when we were there is, and I took a lot of pictures, you first start in like learning about the history of Kennesaw House and the owners, and so there's like a wardrobe or a desk that has an upper cabinet, and we swear the cabinet was closed, but when we looped back around, it was open. Now, we went back and looked at all of the photos, and we didn't have any good photos of the cabinet door, so we can neither confirm or deny it, but my mother-in-law, David, and I all swear that it was shut. The only caveat that we have to this is that a train passed by during the time we were there, so it could have shaken open the door. But it was definitely creepy.
Right. I mean, the building is very close to the train tracks.
Yes. Like dangerously close almost.
Well, luckily there is a fence separating, so, there are safety measures, but...
Right.
But yeah, that was very interesting that the cabinet doors were open.
Right. Because I don't understand. There is nothing in the cabinet, so I don't know why they would have it open. But anyways, that was our only experience. We had a really great time learning about the history there. Obviously answering, would we visit this place of paranormal phenomena? We have. I would personally love to go back and experience a ghost hunt there, or just any nighttime thing there. Because overall, it sounds like the hauntings are scary, but not harmful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I definitely would love to go back for a ghost tour, too.
Yeah, and I think that your family that lives down there would also be very interested in that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of them were going to come, but it was very cold that day.
Yeah, unseasonably cold for
very
Georgia.
Unseasonably cold.
So that is it for our second episode of Paranormal Outside of Pennsylvania, where we visited Georgia. Tune in next Thursday to hear what we discuss next.